Hello, Irish fans. It's time to look forward to Virginia Tech. The Fighting Irish travel to Blacksburg, Virginia this Saturday night to enter Sandman and a Virginia Tech Hokies team that has long been tough at home, Tyler. And the Irish will go there at 7:30. It's going to be a loud crowd. We'll get into all of those dynamics about playing the road game. But I think at the top, let's just start with some news items coming out of Brian Kelly's presser yesterday and the injury report. What's new there?
Yeah, Michael Carmody is obviously still dealing with that left ankle injury. I think he re-aggravated that against Cincinnati, and we obviously saw Joe Alt come into the game and play a lot of left tackle for Notre Dame. And I mean, that's been a carousel. The offensive line's been a big point of concern for Notre Dame all year, but particularly that left tackle spot, guys have been in and out. So Michael Carmody, once again, is day-to-day with an ankle injury. Joe Wilkins, he hurt his knee against Cincinnati. We saw him leave that game early on, and he actually got an MRI earlier this week. We don't know the results of that MRI yet. Brian Kelly will probably let us know later on in the week, but that's obviously something to monitor, being that the Notre Dame wide receiver, situation has also been a little bit of a question mark this year. It's pretty thin group. We've only seen Wilkins come in for the likes of Kevin Austin, Braden Lenzy, and Avery Davis a few times. So really, those are your four core guys. You can't really afford to lose one of those guys. Brian Kelly said that Hines should return to the Notre Dame defensive line after missing a couple games in the concussion protocol. So that is something to watch. And then we'll go back to that left tackle position as well. Tosh Baker has entered the concussion protocol. So I would likely I would not expect to see him on Saturday against Virginia Tech. So, everything I just said about that left tackle position, it's still kind of holding true. You've got Carmody banged up with the ankle. You've got Tosh Baker in concussion protocol, and you might have to look at Joe Alt, true freshman, to start there for Notre Dame against Virginia Tech.
And what's the latest on Michael Mayer?
Yeah, definitely. Michael Mayer is dealing with what he said after the game was a little bit of a groin injury. Obviously, they had about 48 hours to take a look and further detail what was going on with him. Brian Kelly said it is a adductor strain, so obviously dealing with that hip area, that's a pretty big deal for a guy like Mayer who's trying to get in and out of breaks, catching footballs and whatnot. So he expects to play on Saturday. He obviously played through it against Cincinnati. He was probably the brightest spot on that offense and catching 8 passes for 93 yards. So Michael Mayer is a guy that's probably going to play through a whole lot. If he can put on the pads and put a helmet on and get out there, he's going to do it, but definitely worth monitoring his hip injury as we go into this Virginia Tech game.
Want to run a couple of comments right here from Coach Kelly during Monday's presser about the quarterback situation.
We'll talk to the guys today when they come over, but it's not any different from what I kind of mentioned to everybody here, is that we're going to have one guy and we're going to let him know that the reps are for him to be the starter, and focus on one guy. We just haven't gotten a chance to talk to that.
In making your choice of who you wanted at quarterback, what steps or what was the evaluation?
Who graded out well, who played well. Nobody was perfect, as we know. At the quarterback position, there was mistakes made by all three. But I think at the end of the day, who gives you the best chance to win? This is still about winning football games. We feel like we've got a team that can win the rest of their games, and we want to be able to put the quarterback out there that we believe gives us the chance to do that.
What'd you think coming out of that?
Yeah, obviously Kelly said that it doesn't really have anything to do with a competitive advantage, so he's not trying to hold anything from Virginia Tech. I thought it was funny when he said, look, Virginia Tech, they're pretty smart. They've seen all three of these guys, Jack Cohn, Drew Pine, Tyler Buckner. They've seen all three of these guys play. Everybody's seen all three of these guys play, so it's not like we're withholding anything. But what's also interesting about what he said, you go back 9 or 10 days earlier in the Soldier Field, the bowels of that stadium, I wouldn't even really call it a press room. They kind of shuffled us into like a little small, visitors media closet, basically. And that's when this quarterback controversy, if that's what you'll call it, really started heating up, because Jack Cohn goes down with his own ankle injury, and then Drew Pine comes in and plays the rest of that game. Brian Kelly was asked, who's your starting quarterback going forward? And he said, Jack Cohn is our starter. 10 days later, he wouldn't say that at all. He wouldn't say who the starter is, but he didn't say it's Jack Cohn. So I think you're definitely able to read between the lines a little bit there. Drew Pine led the only 2 scoring drives of the game for Notre Dame against Cincinnati. The Irish are shut out in the first half with Jack Cohn on the field. They score 13, should have been 14 points with Drew Pine in the game in the second half. So read between the lines. Kelly wouldn't say who's going to start, but I think a lot of Notre Dame fans have a pretty good idea.
Coach Kelly kind of seemed a little exasperated at the end of the press conference yesterday when asked about the offensive line. Understandably, that's a huge issue for the Fighting Irish team this year, but he jokingly said to the media, "Well, give me your guys' starting 5." Well, I guess Tyler, I'll speak for Coach Kelly here and ask you, who is your ideal starting 5? Let's assume that Carmody is healthy, okay? But still, go ahead.
Okay, that makes it a little more interesting because if
Yeah.
Carmody was not healthy, I would say Joe Alt for sure at left tackle. But okay, Carmody's healthy. I'm putting Carmody at left tackle just because he's a sophomore. He's played a little bit more than Joe Alt has this season. So I'll go Carmody at left tackle. I think a lot of people are going to be a little annoyed by this, but I would still keep Zeke Correll at left guard just because if you look at Pro Football Focus, and that's a very polarizing site. People have their opinions on Pro Football Focus. Yep. He's actually grading out as one of Notre Dame's best pass blockers. He has a 73 grade in pass blocking, and compared to Kane Madden, which we'll get to in a second, that's a lot better. Kane's grading out at 57. So I'll go Carmody, Correll, obviously Jarrett Patterson at center. We saw Brian Kelly's comment in the press conference. He said Jarrett Patterson is a center. Jarrett Patterson is our center. So we'll leave him there. I would take Kane Madden out of the starting lineup, and I'd put Andrew Kristofic in there. Kristofic's played quite a bit at left guard and right guard this season. I would put him there. I think Kane Madden's just had a big adjustment, and he hasn't been able to make that adjustment. And when you're five games into a season, that's a large enough sample size to say, hey, this isn't working out. Let's put a guy in there who's probably going to start in the future for us, and maybe he's even better than Madden is right now. So put Kristofic at right guard, and then, Josh Lugg, he's had a few plays where he just gets totally outmanned this season and outworked, and the quarterback goes down as a result. But on this offensive line, who hasn't? Even Patterson's been overworked at times. So I would keep him at right guard. So you're looking at Carmody, Correll, Patterson, Kristofic, and Lugg. And I wrote this week at blueandgold.com. Maybe it's Rocco Spindler time at some point. So I know that it's kind of like it's crazy. Notre Dame, everyone always says the backup quarterback's the most popular guy on the team, right? We've seen a little bit of that for Notre Dame this season. Yeah. We've also seen the backup offensive lineman at XYZ position is also the most popular guy on the team as well. So I'm looking for Rocco Spindler to get at least a game or two in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I agree with your starting 5. I want to touch real quick on the defense. We talked before we got on. We've started to watch Virginia Tech a little bit. And the one thing that stands out about their offense, which has gotten off to some slow starts and has a little trouble finishing drives, with Braxton Burmeister as a quarterback can really run. It looks like he can be a slot receiver, actually. He's that quick and can accelerate. Saw Notre Dame last week, particularly their linebackers, struggle a little bit when Ritter got outside the pocket. Obviously, he had that big touchdown at the end of the game. Tyler, what are you looking for out of the Notre Dame defense after, they kind of took one on the chin late in that Cincinnati game?
Yeah, I love Desmond Ritter as a runner, but it was pretty obvious that Cincinnati said, hey, his arm is his greatest weapon, and he's going to beat you with it, and that's what got the job done for the Bearcats in the fourth quarter. Now, going into this game against Virginia Tech, I think Braxton Burmeister is going to run a lot. He's going to run early. He's going to run often. So that's going to put even more pressure on a Notre Dame defense, like you said, whose linebackers didn't have their best game. J.D. Bertrand probably had his worst game of the season. You figured he was going to come down to earth eventually. It kind of happened there against Cincinnati, looking for him to have a bounce-back game. I'll tell you what, though, Isaiah Pryor played decently well, setting the edge against Ritter a few times in that game. Yep. He's going to have his hands full against Burmeister because Burmeister, I think they said over the offseason, these next-gen stats, they did the whole miles per hour thing at Virginia Tech in offseason workouts, and he's the fastest player on the team, offense or defense. He had the fastest top speed. So it's going to be really about, containing him on the edges, not letting him get to the edge because, he likes to throw the ball a little bit too. I know he's a little erratic in situations, but
It's not very
if he's
consistent.
able to if he's able to get things going with his feet, I think that opens up the passing game for Virginia Tech. So look for a secondary as well for Notre Dame. That Clarence Lewis, he didn't have his best game against Cincinnati, so he might be tested a little bit with Trey Turner, who's a really good receiver for Virginia Tech as well. So they have weapons. I don't think they've put it all together this year at Virginia Tech, but if you're looking at it from this standpoint on that side of the ball, Notre Dame needs to bounce back a little bit because I don't think they played as well defensively as they did against Wisconsin and Purdue. And then, like you said, Virginia Tech is really trying to get something going offensively as well. So I think that's as intriguing as the other side of the ball is with the Notre Dame offense on the field. I think this is a pretty interesting matchup as well with the Notre Dame defense versus the Virginia Tech offense.
All right. Well, to our viewers, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Make sure you like this video, Tyler. As always, you're doing a great job. Appreciate your insight. We're going to get more and more into Virginia Tech on blueandgold.com throughout the week. We have another podcast coming. We'll do predictions, another preview, all sorts of stuff. So we got something for you every day. So stay tuned to blueandgold.com, and we'll see you soon.